Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I'd like to thank Mayor Donnie Tuck for inviting me and for being a part of this wonderful commemoration. I'd like to thank my wife, who has supported me, and she's sitting there in the front row looking good. We tried to bring our 3 teenagers, but they said, "Dad, we've heard it all before." And it's also an honor to share the stage with my friend that I've known since 1994, Michael Eric Dyson. There's so much that I'd like to talk with you about, but I only have so much time, and I don't want to talk too much, which reminds me of a humorous story. In the Great Migration, when black folks moved from the rural South up north, and oftentimes when they were in the north, they would send their children back down to be with their grandparents, and little Johnny was no exception. And when he got to be with his grandmother back down south, the grandmother pulled him aside and said, "Johnny, we're having the pastor over for dinner next Sunday, and I want you to be ready. What's your name?" "My name is Johnny Jones." "How old are you?" "I'm 6 years old." "Where do bad boys go?" "They go to hell." That was the conversation that they were having. And then the grandmother said, "And by all means, don't talk too much." And so it was that Sunday morning when the pastor was going to come over, and she pulled Johnny aside and rehearsed with him again. "Now, Johnny, tell me, what's your name?" "My name is Johnny Jones." "Now, Johnny, tell me how old you are." "I'm 6 years old." "And Johnny, tell me what happens to bad boys." Johnny said, "They go to hell." "Good," said the grandma. "And remember, by all means, don't talk too much." And so it was that bewitching hour where the pastor walks into the house to have dinner, and he says, "Miss Jones, oh my, what a wonderful boy you have here." And he turns over and says, "What's your name?" And Johnny, being nervous, he thought, and he said, "My name is Johnny Jones. I'm 6 years old. Go to hell and don't talk to me." So my assignment is to answer the question, what does healing mean without talking too much? Some of the best minds in the world have said that if you want to define something, you must first know what it is not. And in short, what healing is not is violence. Healing is not violent. I dreamed about the opposite of healing, and in the dream, I ran from killers, those who were seeking my life. I was running like mad from them. And in my dream, I found a barn full of animals. And in my dream, I was surrounded by powerful people with guns and chains waiting for me. And through the dream, as they put chains on me in this barn, I forgot that I wore these chains. And I carried these chains as if they were normal, as if I was supposed to be a barn animal. But every now and then I would see another person's chains, or I would realize someone else was suffering. And one day I ran out of the barn. I escaped. And in doing so, the gravity of the chains resumed. I felt them again, and I felt fear again. And I realized that I existed in my dream to be eaten. I realized in my dream I existed only to be eaten. This was a powerful dream for me. No, it was much more. It was a horrific nightmare. And I woke up in a sweat. And it made me existentially realize the horrors of my ancestors on this soil, in this place, 400 years ago, running for their lives. And if they could not run physically, they were running with their souls, trying to go back home, trying to understand this strange land. It was a horrific nightmare. And it made me understand that the opposite of healing is the dehumanizing process of seeing the other as property. The opposite of healing is violence. Violence occurs when malignant cells attack healthy cells. Violence occurs when someone forces semen into another person's body. That is called rape. Violence occurs when I think there should be no one else except me. That is called entitlement. The opposite of healing is the removal of another person's identity by replacing it with my own. And so I recall someone in my dreams saying, "We do not exist to be eaten. We are the created. God created us. And we exist to be loved." When we think about slavery, it's to think how those who are enslaving the other are committing the ultimate violence. Because it is to perceive that someone else does not really exist. What exists is property. And through 400 years of history, we struggle with this simple theological fact. God does not create chains. God does not create guns. God does not build walls. God creates life. God creates in such a way that life freely exists. Anytime guns and chains appear, so do demons. We are here today to exorcise demons. And the problem with demons is that they seek to erase our memory of God. And this clues us in that violence itself is of the devil. To expose violence for what it truly is to expose the ways of the devil. Ways that seek amnesia of God. Amnesia that others actually exist. The key practice in such exorcism is to name the demons which try to pervade our Western world. And their names, these demons, the names are individualism, exploitation, racism. And so as not to allow any of us in this space to think that we can escape the reality of these demons, it is important for us spiritual people who try to expose these demons to realize we too can be possessed by them. We too can be the pawns of demons. For example, in our Western Christian world, we are obsessed with personal salvation. And we seem to have no problem whatsoever with how the pleasures of a personal heaven can exist alongside the suffering of someone in hell. But how can this be? How can you be completely happy, conscious that someone is suffering, weeping, gnashing their teeth forever? How can you still be in heaven, conscious that someone else is in hell? Demons rejoice in this bad kind of theology, to think that I can be saved without my sisters and brothers, that I can be saved without my friends, and dare should I say that I can be saved without my enemies. When God creates us, God does not separate us. God creates us interdependently. And not only is Martin Luther King Jr. correct in saying that any injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, so too is it true that an obsession with personal salvation is a threat to the kingdom of heaven. Nikki Giovanni, who I was sad to see who could not come yesterday, says, we owe a great deal to Black people who not only survived the transatlantic slave trade, but stayed sane when they got here. We will need this healing factor of Black people to get to Mars, she said. We will need such people capable of sustaining community on a seemingly impossible journey. We need Black people in an individualistic world, a world that is losing the art of relational or communal knowing. And I've written about such relational knowing through Archbishop Desmond Tutu's Ubuntu theology. In other words, for me to know my ultimate identity, I need you to know yours. We both need each other as a reference point to make sense of who each other is. You can't know you are beautiful unless there is a community that makes beauty intelligible. You can't know you're a stand-up comedian if no one laughs at your jokes. We know relationally, and our identities are dependent upon interdependence. And that is, I cannot know myself by myself. And this is why God is so important. And when God says, I am who I am, God inherently points identity through relationships. In other words, to know God, we need to learn about relational knowledge. God makes us so interdependent that we end up looking like God, the imago Dei, the image of God. And as a person made in the image of God, I need other persons to know my own identity. For example, I am not conscious of what I am thinking without you. And you are not conscious of what you are thinking without me. We are each other's compasses trying to find identity. And that's why forgiveness is so important, but not the cheap kind. Forgiveness happens when there is contrition, the awareness of guilt to make restitution possible. And Archbishop Tutu states this: if I have stolen your sheep, no matter how eloquent my protestations of contrition and repentance may be, if I still keep what I have stolen and do not make proper restitution, my confession is a sham. We need forgiveness, but not the cheap kind. Instead of retaliation and perpetual violence, God uses the genius, the resilience, the sanity of African people to not only find a personal way to be human again, but as Black people, we have helped the world to find a communal way to be human again. The communal way we confront evil is not through violence, but through the revelation of evil. Once evil is exposed, it is deemed powerless. This is our genius. We have given the world civil rights. Black people, we have given the world civil rights. This is our genius. We exhibit the Holy Spirit in our worship. This is our genius. We give the world resilience. This is our genius. And in a communal way of knowing God, we do not see a Santa Claus or a game show host passing out prizes to individuals in a crowd. No, our God is much different. We know the God who was also afflicted, also put in chains, also killed, but also resilient. Even if African people seem hopelessly trapped in the closed systems of violence, poverty, and racism, the image of God is planted in us in such a way that its slow vegetative movements responding to light will one day reveal the kingdom of heaven. This kingdom of heaven is not just for individuals. It's even for my enemies. St. Paul puts it this way: we are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not driven to despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Struck down, but not destroyed. So as I close, I've tried to tell you what healing is not. And And I should close with what it is. At the end of my dream, I was no longer enslaved when I recognized that others were suffering. It was in that moment that I realized who I was. And knowing that others suffered freed me from a normalized evil. I realized evil should never be normal. I was free to run, to exalt in how God created me to love. Love is the substance of healing. And when we love, it is no longer the frantic kind of running away from predators. When we love, it is the kind of running toward something, better yet, running towards someone. It is not a herd of cattle running, rather it is the kind of running that produces endorphins, euphoria, the reality that we are all made in the image of God, even my enemies. And in my dream, I looked around and realized I was running with others towards someone, and all of us lacked nothing. We were completely happy. We ran through green pastures and still waters. We ran towards someone who restores souls, who leads us through lush pathways. And even though we sometimes move through obscure valleys, the one we run toward tells us to fear no evil, because the one we run toward is also running with us. It's been a pleasure.